In this video we are going to work on a Xbox One controller which has multiple faults, which for a start it doesn't have a shell obviously, so it's completely bare bones. It used to have a shell because for context I did actually work on this earlier, or at least I checked the controller earlier and made some notes of what is wrong with it. So in short, you can already see that the analog stick here is broken, so we will need to replace that. Also the button right here is completely stuck, so we cannot press it in like the other one, which is still nice and responsive. This one does not do anything. I suspect it has to do with some dirt, which you can see on the side of the controller. So yeah, we might need to give the whole controller a good clean. As you can see, it's pretty dirty. I think these buttons are maybe okay. Maybe not, this one is stuck. So I might actually replace this anyway, because the USB right here is also faulty, or at least it does not make a good connection. And it kind of disconnects once every while. So when you move the cable around a tiny bit, it will disconnect and then it will reconnect and then disconnect again. So a little bit intermittent. So yeah, we need quite a bit of replacement parts for this. So here is the replacement USB port. And these are the sticks with which we are going to replace the analogs. And you can see these are Hall effect sticks from Jinful. I'm not sure which version this is. I've had these for quite some time at this point. Definitely over a year and a half, I think. But yeah, they should be working fine. And yeah, once they are installed, we can calibrate them manually via the holes right here with the help of a tweezer, for example. So yeah, it should make for an interesting video, I think. So yeah, to start, I'm going to take the whole controller apart. So yeah, let's do that right now. So to take all these silver screws out, we are going to be using a T6 Torx screwdriver. So now that all the screws are out, we can take out the motherboard, which also is pretty dirty, actually. And here is the USB port, which if you look at it, it doesn't really look bad or anything, but I still want to replace it, just to be sure. And I also want to look at this button right here, since that was the one that was really spongy. I do not see anything wrong with the button itself. So it's not that the pads are dirty or that a trace is broken. Seems a little unlikely. But if you look at where the traces go for this motherboard, then I think this mess right here is also on the same trace that goes to this button. So it may be that the dirt right here is causing problems with the switch. Although that does not explain why I cannot press it in properly. So maybe we need to have a take a look at this rubber pad right here. I think with this one we have the issue. And that does seem to respond okay. I'm sorry, this one is the one with the issue. You can also see the dirt around it, which of course the button is pretty dirty. But it presses in okay. And the button itself is also fine. So I'm going to temporarily put the motherboard back in to see if maybe it was just a misaligned button. A little tricky to install it like this. So there we go. And yet, even if we... Oh, there we go. It just seemed to snap into place, and now it is working as intended. I think maybe it was more or less dirt, and maybe just taking it out and now putting it in has loosened it enough that it will work. So I think if we just give it a good clean, then that should not cause any more problems. So we do not need to worry about that, I think. I'm going to take all the buttons out. For now we can put this to the side. And we can start with either this motherboard or with this one. I think we will start with this motherboard. Yeah, there's quite a lot going on, so I think I will take you under the microscope so we can take a better look at the damage on the motherboard. So here we are under the microscope. Yeah, let's start with doing a bit of a visual inspection. And yeah, we can see that it is quite dirty. It might even be corrosion, but I think it might really just be dirt. See how it scrapes off. It does seem to scrape off pretty easily, and the solder is not really affected in the way that corrosion would. So I think this is purely dirt or maybe old flux that happened to attract some dirt. And yeah, right here we have more dirt. Here it does seem that this button is working okay. And yeah, here's the mess, which does connect to the button right there. Well, maybe not actually. I'll scrap that. Yeah, there's quite a lot going on here. Just more dirt. I don't think it affected any of the traces. This is just on the surface of the motherboard, so again, a good clean should take care of that. I also do not see any missing components, so everything seems to be into place. And here's the other button. Also seems to work okay. It may be that the dirt causes it to stick a little bit. The back is surprisingly pretty clean, relatively. If you look at where the buttons are located, there's some dirt around there, but it's definitely not too bad. So yeah, just more surface dust and grime. And it's quite a common thing for these buttons to go bad or to not respond that well anymore. And it's quite a precise fit. So if the button is going a little bit bad, then you will definitely notice that, especially if it is only on one side and the other side is still working okay. But now let's finally look at the USB port, which is up here. If you look all the way on the left side right here, it seems to be a small sign of corrosion, if I'm not mistaken. It's also a little bit broken. And if you zoom in on the back of the USB port, I thought I saw some cracked plastic maybe. That may just be the model of the port. No, that seems to all be really sturdy. So that is quite okay actually. I'm going to pour some IPA in here, isopropyl alcohol. Just go over it with a toothbrush. See how well it cleans out. Okay, that seems to have cleaned up pretty well. So I'm going to test to see how the USB cable fits into the motherboard. As if that just sits nicely and firm, then maybe it is not necessary to replace the whole board since everything seems to be looking nice. But I will quickly plug it in. So even though it does look pretty okay, the USB port, it does seem to be a little bit loose in comparison with the replacement port we have right here. I'm not sure if I'm able to see a visual difference, but it might still be a good idea to replace it anyway. I mean, I know I'm going a bit back and forth on replacing or keeping the part, but I mean, if it works, and then I'm not necessarily going to replace it, but there is enough wrong with this USB port that I want to replace it anyway. And I will also be replacing the buttons for the left trigger and right trigger, I think. So these are the replacements. I think if you are going to replace them, then I would recommend to replace them both because it can create a bit of a different feeling on either side. So it's not necessarily comfortable. So yeah, I think we are going to start with that. And I'm going to be using a temperature of 350 Celsius at 50% airflow. Considering that this is a USB port which I will be removing from the board, I'm actually going to heat up from the above side. So I don't risk burning the diode on the other side of the board. So right here is where we need to work to put on the new USB port. So I think the first thing I will do is I will desolder the old solder from the pad since it does not really look that nice. So I want to have everything fresh solder. So let's add some flux and I will use some solder wick to actually take care of the old solder. Which I need to make sure that I do not knock off any components. Since they are so small, it's very easy for that to happen. I can tell from experience. And now we are simply going to retin everything with some fresh leaded solder. And I will actually be using the hot air station again to put the USB port on. You can see right there is a bit of solder under the USB port actually that is used to keep the port in place. You can definitely also drop a bit of super glue right here to keep the port in place if you do not want to use hot air or you cannot use hot air to give it a bit more sturdiness. I've definitely done that before in the past, but this time I'm just going to use the hot air to put the new port on. So I think that is good enough. So for temperature, I will probably use 375 Celsius. I had to up the temperature actually to get the port off, and I will keep the same amount of airflow, which was 50%. Just trying to get some heat into the board right now from the underside. Then I will actually switch to the upper side of the motherboard and get the heat from there. And once all the solder is melted, I will attempt to put in the USB port. Which hopefully with the leaded solder that will go a little bit faster. I think it may already be melted actually. So now the old buttons are out and you could see I struggled a little bit on the first button I did. The solder rig did not really do the trick right there. I think what would have helped is if I would have instantly put some leaded solder with the unleaded solder, which of course would have lowered the melting temperature. I think that would have done a little bit better. I did do that on the second button I removed and that went for much smoother. Although in combination with the desoldering pump. Now I'm just going to clean up around the area and after that we can install the new buttons. And I embarrassingly almost forgot because I got distracted by the pins of the USB port, but of course we need to solder this. But one thing, if you pay attention, it seems like the heat was maybe on for too long or maybe it was a little bit too high. And you will see that it seems to have popcorned a little bit. Which maybe is not the end of the world considering that this is, I think, all ground. So it's not that big a deal, but you can see right there, it has delaminated a little bit, which is not ideal, but it's not horrible. But yeah, that definitely sucks a little bit. I think it's only limited to this side of the board. I only just noticed it. If you look at the USB port on this side, then you cannot see any delamination. So I think this is all clear. But yeah, I think what happened is that I left the temperature a little bit too high and in the same spot for too long, or maybe a little bit too close. If you look at the button here, this seems to still be perfectly fine. So I think maybe just kept it a little bit too close. Which I don't think that happened before. I've definitely worked with hot air before, but that kinda sucks, of course. But the ground still seems to work fine as we saw, so I'm not too worried about it. It would be more worrying if there are actual data tracers going around here, but that's not the case. So I'm still going to continue the repair, but I will keep that in mind. I mean, it's unlikely that this controller is going anywhere, but I might actually put the motherboards into my own Xbox controller since I'm going to install Hall effects on it. So I will not be selling this off. At least I want to be transparent about that. Of course, I do not want it to be on there for super long. So I might need to also put a little bit of solder on the upper side of the motherboard to make sure that the USB port stays in place nicely. I mean, technically it should be okay, but I just want some cleaner connections on some of these ports. When tinning the front of the USB port, you need to watch out that you do not put too much on there, or else it can actually go into the USB ports, and of course you do not want that to happen. Check the USB port. And on the right side we are okay, but if you look on the left side, you can see there is some solder into the USB port, and that means that it's not going to connect well or at all. So we will need to get rid of the excess solder right there, which means that I will remove everything with some desoldering. I will try. So I hope that is a little bit better. I think it actually might be better. Just need to clean it up a little bit and then we can check it. So yeah, as you can see, I can actually plug a USB cable in the actual port. It does wiggle around a little bit, but I think it is held into place pretty well. And you can see I'm pulling on the cord right here and it's not going anywhere. So I think that is okay. So I think we are done with the USB. And now we can actually move on to the installment of the buttons. So now the buttons are both installed, and I think it's also a good idea to test these ones, which at least is really easy to do. So you want to have one probe on the ground and then one on either of the data lines. That's definitely interesting. On this one, if I go on one ground and one data line, I get nothing, which I think is what's supposed to happen, but on the other side, I get a beep. Oh, never mind, that only happens one way. Okay, so these ones will beep, and these ones, okay. Okay, then I get it, since this one is probably the only data line and the rest is all ground. I did not know that or notice that, so that's where my confusion came from. But if we tap these two and tap the button, should be able to get a beep. So we can see that that one is working, and I hope the other side will work as well. It's a little tricky since the button is a little bit hidden, but I will do my best. I think this should do the trick. So yeah, the buttons are working, which means that the work in terms of repairs on this board is done. So yeah, next up we are going to work on the second motherboard of the Xbox. And just to give a better overview of the board we've worked on, here is the replacement USB port, which is all working, although we have delaminated some of the motherboard on this side, but it is all ground, so that is not a problem. And of course we did the replacement on these buttons, so those are all nice and fresh. Here are all the old parts, and those can all go in the trash. And yeah, let's move on to the other motherboard. So now there is some work that we done on the second motherboard, which are the two analog sticks, which we both need to remove, and we need to replace with the Hall effect sticks ones. And yeah, I'm going to use a very simple method for that, and also one that is relatively new to me. But we are going to be using this soldering tip, which is compatible with the analog sticks for the Xbox Ones and PlayStation 4s and 5s, etc. So we will basically melt it like this, and then we should be able to pull it out within a few seconds. It's a really nice thing to use. I had very low expectations of it, but it definitely blew me out of the water. It works insanely well, and it saves a lot of time when it comes to these desoldering stuff. And it also, I think, is maybe better for the motherboard, since you do not need to keep the heat on it for a very long time. You can work very quickly. So yeah, that's all pretty positive, and I'm happy that I discovered this. So I'm going to be putting some flux around the soldering iron or around the analog stick. I'm not going to be adding leaded solder because it's not really needed, but I will add some solder into the tip itself to make the solder flow a little bit quicker. So now we are going to heat up the iron, and it will take a while actually, because of the mass of the iron tip, of course. It's quite big, and it's also existing of two parts. So we have the this part and the actual tip, and of course the heat needs to go through there, but it takes a while. And I'm using the iron at 350 Celsius, at 360 Celsius. So I think that is enough. So now we need to align the actual iron tip. I mean, I struggled a little bit there with the getting the stick out. I think the reason for that is that I did not clean out the old solder the previous time. I think that may have interfered a little bit with how well the iron tip actually could sit on the stick. So I'm just going to clean this out. Alright, so here we go for the second stick. You can see this went out instantly. That's kind of how it's supposed to work. So I think for myself in the future, I will need to maintain the iron tip a little bit better. Then it will work nice and smoothly. So now it's important that we clean out the solder holes. And to do that, I'm going to be using a hot air station at 350 Celsius and 50% airflow with a desolder pump. So that's all the solder cleared out with help of the hot air station. For now it should be easy to move on to reinstall the Holofax sticks. Also here you can see the analog stick which we took off from close up, and you can see it's completely obliterated by the person who smashed the controller into the wall most likely. I have no idea how you are able to break the stick otherwise. But yeah, the Holofax sticks are installed, so we can simply solder them on with the soldering iron if I am smart enough to put a tip in the soldering iron. And then we can simply solder it into place. The surface tension should hold the analog stick into place, so I don't think we need to worry about the analog stick being not straight into the motherboard. So I will just anchor it down a little bit. It will actually come in with some flux to help me out a little bit. So that's the analog stick into place on this side anyway. So now we can flip to the other side of the motherboard. So those are the Holofax sticks installed. And if we look at the motherboards flat, you can see that they are seemingly installed straight into the motherboard. So there's no, it's not screwed one side or another. So it looks all pretty well, which means that we are done with the motherboard work. Now I have a lot of other work to do, which mainly involves cleaning. You can see here it's disgusting. And if you look under the motor side as well, you can definitely see that I need to take the whole thing apart and I will need to clean it inside out. I'm going to do that off camera, since that is a bit of a easy workflow for me. But yeah, maybe I can quickly explain how I'm going to clean it. So for the plastic parts, mainly for the buttons and such. So for the buttons, I will use a basically Windex. So a ammonium cleaner that works pretty effective. And for the shell, I tend to use this. This is quite powerful actually. It's a type of foam which you can spray on, and then I use a little painting brush to just spread it on the shell to clean it, and then I wipe it down with a cloth, and that's it. For the inside the buttons, I will use a Q-tip with some IPA to get in there. Yeah, I think that is it. So I will do that, and Then when I am back, we are going to assemble the controller, and so I'm going to do that right now, and once that's done, then we can reassemble the controller. Alright, so you should be able to see the phone and my PC screen, so I'm going to connect it in 3, 2, and 1. Here that the USB has connected, and yeah, we can see that we have the gamepad on here, and it seems to be working. So of course for these buttons I need to hold the other button back, and yeah, that is being registered. On the other side also, but now this one is pressed in. Oh, that is strange. You see that they are both pressed in at the same time. I wonder if that has to do with the plastic. Maybe the plastic is not completely aligned, which causes it to double press. Of course, I'm holding the triggers back, so that is a bit unfortunate. But like I said at the beginning of the video, is that I'm actually going to take this second motherboard, so this one, and I will install it into my current controller, which I use on the PC, which is this one, which does not have the Halifax sticks. So I will actually be replacing that board. So I have some Halifax sticks. So what the front motherboard is doing, if it is not working as intended, that is not really important, as for now at least. It's more important that the Halifax sticks are centered as much as possible, which I think the left stick is pretty close, actually. Just the right stick is a little bit off, I think, especially upwards a little bit. So I think I may correct that. I don't think I can do it while it's connected, but yeah, I think I want it to be a little bit down, maybe like this, then it seems to be very similar. So I will just do that, and then I will call it on this controller. So yeah, if you take off the stick and I want it to be a little bit down, a little bit, then we need to work with this potentiometer right here. I think I just need to disconnect the antenna right here. Then I think I should be able to take it out after I remove the screws. It's kind of important. And yeah, this is good enough for me. I think for the camera it might be a different story. I will see if I can make it work. But it's a little bit hard to film maybe. And of course I need to reinstall this one. I need something between here and here. Maybe this will work for that. It does seem to do the job. I think this is the most visible I can make it. Basically what you want to do is you want to put a tweezer in here. For example, in this side right now. And then you basically want to move the stick up and down while you have the tweezer in here to make sure that the position can move a little bit. I'm definitely not an expert in this. I have not really done it many times before because I mostly work on PlayStation controllers. And for that you can software calibrate it nowadays. So this is not really needed anymore. So you basically want to move it a little bit upwards in this case, step the tweezer in there, and then I will pull it down a little bit in the hopes that that is the position in which the magnet is a little bit more straightened out. But I'm not too sure about if that is correct or not. But I've made a minor adjustment, so I will leave it at that. And then we need to plug it in again. I'm also not going to put any screws in. Just going to plug it in, put the stick on there, and then I will move to the gamepad tester again and we can see what happens. It's always a bit of a gamble unless you work on these controllers a lot, so I will correct it the other way. So instead of going up, we are going down with the magnet, and we will see if that makes a positive change. Okay, I just realized I was not recording on the PC screen, but yeah, the stick was twisting basically in the upper direction. So it was going like this basically. So we want it in the other direction. So now I'm going to put the tweezer in the left side of the joystick. I'll pull it backwards, put the tweezer in, then pull it forward. Of course, it's purely a gamble whether this is enough or not. But yeah, it's the way it is with these calibrations, unfortunately. For the Xbox One at least, and I think for the series You can actually software calibrate it nowadays, but this is still the more old-fashioned way. So this time you should be able to see the computer tab. So we're going to plug it in again, see what happens. Okay, I think we did really well on that actually. I think that is almost the same as the other one. I think it's even better. Yeah, I am happy with that, very happy. So I'm just going to leave it like that. This is good enough for me. I think with the other one, it's slightly more precise, if that makes sense, on the left and right axis. So I don't not really want to mess with that. And since I'm going to be using myself, it does not need to be perfect anyway. So yeah, I'm happy with that. I think we can quickly test all the buttons while I'm at it. So this is working, there's the D-pad, L3 is working, R3 is working, and I accidentally pushed the controller out. Oops. What happens when you do not put the screws back in? I think we should be back online, which we are. Pushing the right trigger. This one is working. Not really how it was working before. Yeah. Okay, this better. If you push right here, then it does register very fine. Yeah, okay. Now the other side, which it does register. Wait. You can see that it does not double trigger the front buttons anymore, which I have no idea what I did to fix that. Oh, never mind. I should not have said anything. I still have no idea how that is caused. I would think the plastic, as it does not happen this way, but it does happen this way, which kind of tells me that it's not a electrical problem per se. Otherwise, I would expect the same thing to happen if I activate this button, which on its own triggers fine, but now it's not doing anything. If I do this, yeah, see that? I pulled off the plastic and then it does not trigger, and if I pull it down, it does trigger. So it's something with the plastic. Maybe I installed it incorrectly. It's definitely possible. I do not, the whole 100th time I say this, but I do not really work on Xbox One controllers. And I think it's really a matter of perfect alignment, and maybe even of being in the shell, that this all sits perfectly and then it will all operate fine. To quickly test the D-pad or the face buttons. You can test the vibration. I pull off the tape a little bit right here. Hopefully you can see it like that. It's definitely working. I think lastly we can check the circularity of the joysticks, just for fun. Okay, that's interesting. This apparently has the same problem as some other sticks I tested the other day. I have no idea if this is limited to Xbox One controllers. I've never really seen it with any other controller in which I installed Holodeck sticks, which mostly are PlayStation controllers, but for some reason, if I go up and then I go in that middle position, in this case between up and the right, then it stays still for a while when I can still move it. Although here, yeah, it does happen. It's only for a few seconds, but it's definitely interesting. I don't think I've not seen it that much on other controllers. And yeah, that gives it a pretty big error rate of 21%. I think the normal Xbox sticks are lower than that. Maybe I can test the other controller I have for reference. And yeah, this one has the normal controller or the normal Holodeck stick still. And you can see that that is, yeah, this one is quite high actually. But yeah, the stick is definitely more used. I think it might be adjusting a little bit even. But yeah, it's basically half of what the Holodeck sticks are. So it's definitely not very good. And I do have PlayStation controllers with Holodeck sticks. These are also K-Silver ones, so I might as well test them all at this point. And yeah, these fonts are software calibrated. I do need to inform you about that. And these fonts, barely have any error rate, as you can see. Like 5%, which is very nice. Which is kind of what you would want, of course. As low as possible. And here's another one. That's the same model Holodeck sticks as the Xbox controller. Of course, the PlayStation 4 version of that one. And oh, this one is quite high actually. I don't remember if I ever software calibrated this one. This is from a video I did I think before the software calibration was a thing, so I do not think this is software calibrated. And it is pretty similar, I think, then. But you can see that in the corners, it does actually register much better than for the Xbox, which is pretty interesting. I doubt if it matters in gameplay, but it's definitely a interesting difference for sure. And of course, when it comes to the error rate, it is basically the same. It does not impact the gameplay, but still. But interesting to compare those. I guess this is the end of the video with the unfinished Xbox here. At least it made for a good test in regard to the Half-Life sticks. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not really how I would want to end the video. It's a bit unfinished, I feel. But hopefully it gives a bit more info about these Half-Life sticks. I'm not sure how I feel about them on the Xbox One. I have no idea if it will make the gaming experience really better. With my PlayStation 4 controllers, I just installed them in all my controllers since I really like them a lot more than the analog sticks. And yeah, the analog sticks are really bad quality, the ones that ship from the factory. I think on the PlayStation 5 even it's still pretty horrible actually. But yeah, that is the end of the video. So thank you for watching. I hope this video was somewhat informative. If it was, you can leave a like, you can subscribe to the channel. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next one. Have a good day.